Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Courtside. I'm your host, Andrew Cohen. Courtside is a podcast dedicated to all things sports. In today's episode, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Jimmy Butler and also talk a little bit about the pace of play changes the MLB has recently considered making. So sit back, relax, and take a seat. Courtside. Alright, so I know I've talked a lot about Jimmy Butler lately, but this trade continues to just get more and more interesting. So again, of course, we already know the Timberwolves traded him to the 76ers. We all know what that trade looked like. However, what you may not know is that according to Bleacher Report, Minnesota had two other deals on the table, and they declined both in order to accept the trade from Philly. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to analyze all three trades that Minnesota had on the table and decide for myself which one Minnesota should have made. So we're going to play Little GM today. And let's start off with the trade Minnesota actually made. They traded Jimmy Butler and Justin Patton in exchange for Robert Covington, Dario Saric, Jared Bayless, and a future second-round pick. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze this trade using the players' stats from before the trade. So while they were all on Philadelphia, because, everybody's played, a game or two with their new team. So let's start off with Covington. Over his entire career with the 76ers, he averaged about 13 points, 5.5 rebounds, and a steal and a half per game. Now he's also under contract for 3 seasons after this one at about $10 million per year, which is a pretty solid contract for a nice 3-and-D player. Next up is Dario Saric, solid young big man, in the middle of a down year for Philly, shooting just 30% from 3 and 36.4% overall. And his points per game had gone down by 3.5 points from a year ago. But he's still on his rookie contract until the end of the 2021 season. So for this year, next year, and then they have a team option for next year, for the year after that, he could be making just about $3.5 million, which is a steal for Minnesota. Then finally, you have Jared Bayless. I'm not going to go over his stats because it's not that important. What's important about him is he is an expiring contract that the Timberwolves can move on from after this year. Second-round pick doesn't really mean anything to me. So, what's good about this trade for Minnesota is that the two solid young players the team got in Covington and Saric, they're both under contract for multiple years, which is good for Minnesota. And in addition, both guys, at least in my opinion, are being underpaid for the production they're going to provide, especially in the case of Saric. Right, rookie deals, everybody gets underpaid for the most part on rookie deals. And then the veteran guy they probably don't want long-term in Jared Bayless, he's on an expiring contract. They can move on from him after this year. So, overall, not a terrible trade here for the Timberwolves. Not necessarily an amazing trade, but a solid trade here for Minnesota. So next, let's move on to the trade offer from the Houston Rockets. So apparently, Houston's final offer was Eric Gordon, Nene, and 2 first-round picks from Houston. Now, if you may remember that Minnesota originally declined a trade from Houston, which was 4 first-round picks, Brandon Knight, and Marquise Chris. Now, I still think that deal was the best deal they could have accepted, but let's just look at this deal for what it is, and let's start off with Eric Gordon. Now, I was highly critical of Gordon's play last time I talked about him, when I talked about the original deal Houston offered to Minnesota. And my feelings on him have not changed. His play has not improved. He's a sharpshooter, shooting 25% from 3-point this year, 11% below what it was last year. Right, so last year, 36%. That's solid. Right, he took a lot of shots. Right, solid. 25% this year. That's awful. His overall shooting percentage is at 32.8%, down 10% from last year. So already he wasn't He wasn't some sort of really efficient player, but this year he is just awful. He's also under contract for next year, so right, if Minnesota wanted to move on from after the year, they can't. But keep in mind, Minnesota did say they wanted him in that original deal that included 4 first-round picks, so Minnesota did ask for him. And then there's Nene, who he's been injured all year, hasn't really been a highly productive backup big man since, about 3 years maybe, right? He's a 36-year-old backup center. He's not making a lot of money, but he is under contract for next year. Now, again, it's a tiny bit of money. It's like $3 million, I think, $4 million, so it's not much. But he is still under contract for next year. They can't just move on from him. So clearly here the players aren't great. They're not going to give Minnesota a lot of production. But you do have to remember that Minnesota would also receive 2 first-round picks. Now, they won't be great picks because Houston's probably going to be good for the next 3 years, and that's what I'm assuming the picks would be from. But they are first-round picks. And if Jimmy Butler if he were to leave Houston after 1 year, the second first-rounder could have actually proven to be pretty valuable. So, the players aren't great here, but you do get 2 draft picks. So once again, a decent deal offered for Jimmy Butler. And then finally, we have Minnesota. They also had a potential deal on the table from the New Orleans Pelicans, who were offering Nikola Mirotic and a first-round pick. Now, Mirotic this year is averaging a career-high 19.4 points and 11.4 rebounds per game, and was by far the best player the Timberwolves could have gotten in return for Butler. Better than Covington, better than Sarge, better than obviously Bayless, better than Eric Gordon, better than Nene. However, he is a free agent after this year, and there's a good chance he's going to get paid some big money. So that's kind of, I think, where this trade kind of falls apart. Listen, remember that the Timberwolves would also get a first-round pick here. And to me, that would probably fall within the 17 to 23 range if it were after this year. Because, yeah, the Pelicans are really good, but they'd also be in the Western Conference. 17 to 23, around that range, that's not a terrible place to be drafting. However, to me, the fact that Mirotic is only under contract for this year definitely makes this trade a lot less intriguing for Minnesota. Alright, so now, in conclusion, I think the worst deal they could have accepted here was the deal from the Rockets. You get 2 undesirable players, in my opinion, both under contract for more than just this year. 2, for the most part, undesirable draft picks, and completely dependent on whether or not Jimmy Butler leaves Houston after just 1 year. So that's the worst deal. I think the Pelicans deal, if Mirotic was under contract for 1 more year, I think that would have been the deal they should have taken. Mirotic, to me, and I think part of it is because he's playing in New Orleans. That's a really good spot for him. And I actually question why the Pelicans would offer him up. I get Jimmy Butler is this really good player, but there's no guarantee he wants to stay in New Orleans, where I don't think you have a guarantee with Mirotic, but I think you could sell him on the idea of, you're really good here. You weren't great in Chicago. If you go somewhere else, you're not going to be as good, not going to be as productive. We're going to give you a lot of money too. So I question why the Pelicans actually offered Mirotic, but I do actually think the Timberwolves made the right trade by making the trade with Philly. The players are good, the contracts are favorable, and even though they don't get a first-round pick, it's not like any of the other first-round picks they could have received were lottery picks or really desirable picks anyways. Like, that to me, I personally don't value first-round picks if they're not in the first half of the first round. I think once you get to the second half of the first round, you're grasping at straws, hoping the guy you take will be really good. Very rarely do you take a guy in the second half of the first round, and you just think, wow, home run of a pick, he's going to be a guaranteed stud. Like, no, that never happens. So, overall, Minnesota made the right trade. Not the best trade, but they could have possibly gotten, right? They could have traded him early in the offseason if they really wanted to. But, a decent trade, the best trade they were offered. So obviously one of the biggest problems with MLB baseball recently has been the length of the games and the overall pace of play. So recently I've actually heard of 3 initiatives that the MLB is considering implementing soon. 2 of them relating to pace of play, the other one just kind of relating to the overall betterment and enjoyment of the game. So I'm going to go over each of them and give my thoughts on each of them as well. And first up is the pitch clock. So the MLB supposedly is considering implementing a 30-second pitch clock for the upcoming 2019 season. This is definitely a step in the right direction, but there is a problem. The pitchers that take the longest time in between pitches take, on average, about 27 seconds. So, on average, this pitch clock won't do anything. However, this is a step in the right direction, and I 100% want the MLB to implement this for this upcoming year. Here's what I think they need to do, though. Start at 30 seconds, then the next year bring it down 3 to 5 seconds, keep bringing it down year by year, eventually to the point where the length is close to about 20 seconds. Now, 20 seconds actually doesn't come from nowhere. Minor League Baseball, before the 2018 season, put in a 20-second pitch clock. So that's why I want that number to get down to about 20 seconds. I think that is actually a fairly good time, because if you're shaving off 5 to 7 seconds between every pitch, right? Let's say a starter throws 90 pitches and you're shaving off 7 seconds from each pitch. That legitimately makes a difference. And you're telling me that major league pitchers can't throw a pitch in 20 seconds, but a double-A pitcher or a single-A or triple-A, whatever, a minor league pitcher can do that in their sleep. So just think about that. Also, I haven't actually heard anybody really talk about this yet, and I'm sure it has been talked about. I just haven't heard it. But the pitch clock in the minors is actually a pretty big deal. It's actually pretty important, in my opinion, for the future of baseball. Because these minor league pitchers, they're going to get really comfortable pitching with 20-second pitch clock. 20-second pitch clock, they're really comfortable with it. So by the time they get up to the majors, even if the pitch clock is still 25 seconds, they're not going to... I guess if they wanted to, they could take a little bit more time. But for, at least a season or two, they've been getting used to this rhythm with the 20-second pitch clock. So these guys are going to be coming in, pitching quickly, in and out of innings. Assuming they don't give up a bunch of hits or runs or whatever. So the fact that these minor league pitchers coming up in the next couple years aren't really going to be wasting time in between pitches is huge. And I get that's a couple years down the road, but at least there is something coming. So even if the pitch clock doesn't get all the way down to 20 seconds within, let's say, 3 years, these minor league pitchers will start coming up. They're going to be pitching below 20 seconds anyways, hopefully making the MLB realize we can just put this pitch clock down to 20 seconds. It's not going to be a big deal. All right, now the second initiative is limiting the amount of pitching changes a team can make, or dictating how long a relief pitcher must pitch for. I absolutely hate this. I hate both of those potential rules. To me, when you directly screw with the way baseball is played, that's when I think you run into a problem for me. I'm not, I'm only a teenager. I'm not some sort of, old baseball fan, of course. But this is just how baseball is played, the way, how managers manage their bullpen. By implementing a rule like this, the lefty specialist rule would essentially be destroyed, and a rule like this would also limit a manager's decisions that they could possibly make to get all 27 outs, especially in a postseason game where we know the bullpen serves a huge role. And I honestly would hate to see a team win a game, especially a big game, whether it be down the stretch or in the postseason, but I would hate to see a team win a game because a manager isn't allowed to change their pitcher, so he leaves him out there to dry, he gets destroyed, and they lose the game. Right? I get it, right? Pitching changes take a lot of time, but I don't think limiting the amount of pitching changes a team can make or dictating how long a pitcher must pitch for really is the way to go. I think the MLB here is overestimating how much time this would actually shave off from games. To me, that's not the way they should approach this problem. Now, the final main initiative I've heard the MLB is considering implementing is eliminating the shift. Now, of course, this one doesn't really have to do with pace of play. It has to do with enjoyment of the game. But I do think it's still interesting to talk about because the shift, there's different theories. Some people think it creates runs. Some people think it gets rid of runs. But no matter what, I hate the idea that the MLB would ban the shift. It's a terrible idea. Now, to me, the shift in baseball is somewhat similar to fouling guys in basketball that can't shoot free throws, right? Sure, the, quote, hack-a-shack rule in the NBA is fairly controversial. I think that's obvious. But the idea that a team is willing to give a guy like Andre Drummond the chance for 2 free points at the free throw line because he stinks at shooting free throws, that's a good idea. If Drummond gets in the low post and he's about to score, why not just foul him, because he's more than likely going to miss one of the 2 free throws more often than not. Right, and I don't like the hack-a-shack rule personally, where you can just walk up to a guy and slap him, send him to the line. But the idea that you foul a guy rather than giving him 2 free points on a layup because he can't make free throws, that's a good idea. In baseball, if a guy comes to the plate that can only hit the ball to one side, a team is willing to give him a free, more or less half the field to hit it, to get a base hit, because there's a good chance he actually won't hit it to that side. If a guy stinks at 3 free throws, he should get in the gym, work on free throws every single day. I don't play on varsity high school basketball. I can shoot free throws pretty well. If a guy struggles to hit the baseball the other way, he should get on the field and work on that every day. Now, of course, I know it is much more difficult than I'm making it sound. I'm not some sort of big MLB prospect. But would it really hurt to lay down a bunt once in a while? Is a free base hit, it's a free base hit if a guy can bunt it down the third baseline against the shift. Why can't a guy just once in a while bunt it down? Lay down a bunt. Make the opposing team, if you want to pull the ball, make the opposing team get out of the shift. Bunt it down the third baseline, get 4 hits if that's how it's going to be done. Just do it, please. I would love to see a guy just lay down a bunt. I don't care. If Bryce Harper comes up to the plate, he's probably not going to lay down a bunt. That's fine. He can hit a home run a lot. But, I don't know. I was watching the Red Sox. I watched the Red Sox a lot, right? Mitch Moreland was scuffling in the middle of the year after becoming an all-star. Late July, early August, he's kind of scuffling. But they give him a shift. Bunt it down the third baseline. Your margin for error is so huge, you can hit it hard. You can bunt it hard down the third baseline. There's nobody there. The shortstop's going to have to run over, or the third baseman in the shortstop position is going to have to run all the way over just to field the ball. And if you have any sort of speed, you're going to be able to beat it out more times than not. So I would like to see guys bunt it down the third baseline, get a few more hits, get the shifts off of them. And listen, overall, even though I would like to see fewer shifts, I would rather it be because the players are learning to hit the ball the other way, whether that's actually learning to hit the other way or just bunting down the third base line. Obviously, that only works for lefties, really. But I'd like to see it be because of what the hitters are actually doing, rather than for the MLB to come in and just ban all defensive shifts altogether. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Courtside. Join me next time where I'll discuss more of the biggest storylines in sports. Also, get ready for a huge announcement coming sometime this week. And as usual, remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you may be listening, and don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter. Link will be in the description. Signing off, this is Andrew Cohen. I will see you next time.